Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I have a travel vlog where I'll be showing you what me and my mum got up to on our 3-day trip to the UK city of York. We began our journey taking a morning train from King's Cross to York Station. We took the LNER service, which took 2 hours in total, arriving in York in the early afternoon, and the whole journey I was very nicely fueled on food. It was such a lovely journey to see a lot of countryside rushing past our window, and I was surprised at how quick the journey took. After checking into our hotel, it was then time to head out into York and to do some exploring. One thing I'll say about York is that everything is pretty much in easy walking distance of each other. One place that we were both very eager to visit was the famous Betty's Tea Room in Helen's Square. But do expect a queue when you first arrive, because it is very popular. Betty's is York's most famous tea room, which has been in existence since 1936. Showcasing a beautiful Art Deco design, it's definitely somewhere you have to visit. Its menu hosts a collection of both classic and contemporary options, no matter what you fancy. Afterwards, we burnt off our culinary delights by walking around the city. We headed up to one of York's most famous streets, the Shambles. The Shambles is a shopping street dating back to the 14th century. It hosts some very quaint shops, and seeing as it looks just like something you would find in a Harry Potter book, it's no wonder why so many of them are wizarding themed. There is of course a shop called The Shop That Must Not Be Named. It's definitely somewhere you have to visit, and take opportunity to take some photographs whilst you're there too. Later we headed to the Botanist restaurant where we had dinner reservations. The Botanist is a beautiful botanical themed restaurant and bar. They have the most tempting selection of cocktails, which we of course sampled, followed by a truly gorgeous roast dinner. Oh my gosh, I could just eat that now. Then it was time for a ghost tour. York is rumoured to be one of the most haunted cities in Europe, and there are plenty of ghost tours to choose from. We went on the original ghost tour of York, which leaves from the King's Arms pub at 8 PM every night, the famous pub that always floods. This tour is believed to be one of the first ever ghost walks in the world. The tour takes you on a tour of the city, telling you a mixture of ghost stories, some gory, some spooky, and some very puzzling. Our tour guide was exceptionally good at describing things to me and another visually impaired woman who also happened to be on the tour, and really helped us to navigate the city with our guide dogs. It's an experience I would highly recommend you do. You get to see a very different side to York in the dark hours. And after plenty of ghost stories, it was then time for bed. The next morning we woke up bright and early to visit the Jorvik Viking Centre. The centre opens at 10 AM and a queue had already formed when we arrived. It gets very busy, so expect to wait if you haven't booked. You get to see the remains of what was once an early Viking settlement right underneath your feet as you walk. Followed by a 17-minute long dark ride, which transports you back in time to Viking York, where you get an insight into what living in Viking York would have been like, complete with sights, sounds and smells of the Viking world. One thing I'll say about this ride was that it was definitely immersive. And to those of you who have assistance dogs, you can take your assistance dogs on the ride as well. After the dark ride, you will then finish up with an exhibition showing you an array of Viking artefacts, even a Viking skeleton. And I'm also pleased to report that their accessibility was absolutely fantastic. They really did make their experience accessible for different disabilities. They even had accessible guides available for the exhibition which they offered me. After that, we did some more exploring of the city. We first headed up to Clifford's Tower and then to the York Castle Museum. However, I wasn't able to film in there due to their no filming policy, but it was certainly worth the visit. By this point we were both rather peckish, so we headed back to the Shambles for some food. We ate at the Flax and Twine tea rooms, which are located above the shop, which is a vintage lover's dream. We had a window seat, so we had a really great view of the Shambles. The place has a really cute, warm, comforting vibe to it, really relaxed, and their food was absolutely incredible. I had the nibbler cheese board, and my mum had the Mediterranean board, followed by homemade cakes. I had a brownie, and my mum had the raspberry and lemon cake. The food here was absolutely amazing, and I absolutely fell in love with the place. It was actually my favourite place that we had food the entire trip. We then took a stroll through the York Museum Gardens. It's very beautiful at this time of year, abundant with flowers, and there's some really interesting architecture to photograph. Excitingly, Owl Adventures were there that day and were offering owl handling sessions. I paid £5 to hold 2 owls, one little barn owl called Bailey and one Canadian grey owl called Grace, and the owl lover in me was in absolute heaven. Day 3 was our last day in York. We left our luggage at a left luggage spot in Queen Street, right next to the station, and then headed into York for one last day of exploring. The first stop on our list for the day was York Minster. York Minster stands proudly over the city of York. Dating back to the 12th century, it's one of the largest cathedrals in Northern Europe. We got there for around 9:30 AM and had a few hours to explore its stunning architecture and the Undercroft Museum underneath. Free guided tours are offered along with the price of your ticket, which I'd highly recommend you take advantage of. The first tour for the day started at 11 AM. The tour guide gave an entertaining and insightful glimpse into York Minster's past, some of the stories behind the many stained glass windows, and how it was influenced and how it came to influence the world around it. The tour really did bring the history of the cathedral to life. York Minster is also famous for housing the largest medieval stained glass window in Britain. Whilst I was there, I also lit a candle in memory of my dear friend Charlotte Eads, who passed away from brain cancer a few years ago. We then headed down to the Undercroft Museum below the cathedral, where we discovered more about the history of York Minster and how it's actually built on what was once a Roman road. Tucked behind York Minster is Treasurer's House, which is now owned by the National Trust. It's a decadent show home once owned by Frank Green, who purchased the building in 1897. It's full of beautiful antiques and paintings, and the gardens are equally as beautiful, with stunning views of the cathedral behind. It's also rumoured to be haunted. It's built over the site of a Roman road, and sightings of Roman soldiers marching in procession have been reported. It's a stunning property and well worth the drop in if you get a chance. It's also worth mentioning that National Trust places always have the best cakes, so head on down to their cafe and be sure to try some. That day we had also booked a York City Cruises boat tour, so we headed to Lendal Bridge where we were due to board. Lendal Bridge is one of 2 drop-off points, the other being Kingstafe Landing. This was a really fun way to see York through a different vantage point as you travel up the River Ouse, which runs through York. During your 45-minute tour, you'll hear about York's past and present. You'll also get to see many of its famous landmarks and travel underneath many of its bridges. You'll also hear lots of fun facts about York, including how York was the birthplace of many of Britain's best loved chocolates, like Kit Kats, Aeros, and Terry's Chocolate Orange, which are still made there today. Fun fact, did you know that 1 billion Kit Kats are made in York every single year? With a few hours left, we decided to go in search of food. We ate at the Guy Fawkes Inn, which was the birthplace of Guy Fawkes, who was born there in 1570. It's a really cosy pub-style restaurant with a great selection of food. The decor was absolutely beautiful, with beautiful paintings on the walls and some information about Guy Fawkes and his life. They are also dog friendly too, and it was such a nice end to a busy few days to unwind and enjoy some really delicious comfort food. I would definitely recommend checking this place out. And sadly by this point it was time to go home. We trudged sadly back down to York Station and boarded the train back to London. I had an absolutely amazing few days in York and really enjoyed seeing the sights of the city. Thank you so much for watching this vlog today. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to see more of my vlogs of my travels, you can also check out my vlog of my trip to Alnwick too, which I will link down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.